So I'm going to go through the process of actually creating an order. The order process is relatively simple. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to create a quote, which tells the API where we're sending the items and also what items we're requesting to be purchased. It's going to generate a set of quotes for the shipping methods. Once we have selected a shipping method, we're going to requote it with that shipping method. And when we do that, it's actually going to give us an ID. And that ID is a unique identifier for the quote. The quote's good for 24 hours. Then we're going to go in and we're going to submit that ID, that quote ID, for processing. It's going to authenticate and generate an order out of that quote. And we'll look at the order in the system once that happens. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that our dealer API is set up correctly in Postman. Again, I'm using Postman for all of our testing. Here you'll see that I have the api.tudarbrands.com with no slash at the end. I'm right now using version 1 of the API. Under authentication, I'm going to go under the token. And so I've got the authentication / token. I've got my client ID here. I'm going to generate a new bearer token. All right, I've generated a new bearer token. I'm going to come back into my main folder. I'm going to go under authorization and I'm going to paste that bearer token and hit save so that my bearer token gets applied accordingly. Under orders, I'm actually going to go under the quote endpoint. So this is your base URL. In this case, I'm using a live version. It's under the version 1 and it's under the orders and the quote endpoint. So let's go ahead and fill in exactly what do we want to buy. So in this case, I want to get a quote on 1, and quantity is a string, and I'm going to do HYB AIF-01-05 and maybe it's a gear selector string. I'm going to do 2 gear selector strings, and that's going to be HYB GSS-01-05. Yep, 05 too. All right, address 1. Let me go ahead and pull up a random address generator. So I just generated a random address. This one happens to be in Texas. So I'm going to dump in that random address. The city is going to be Louisville. Drop that in here. The country code. If you ever have a question about country codes, you can actually use the endpoint called country codes. So you can come down here and if you don't put anything into the parameters, it will actually give you a list of all possible country codes. If you want to search, you can also search, but there's only 100 and something, 200. So it's pretty easy to look at. 167 countries. I happen to know that country code for the United States is just US. US. First name, I'm going to put my first name in. Matt. All right, and shipping provenance. In this case, this is going to be Texas, so TX. I'm going to go into zip code. This is zip code here, 75077. PO number. I don't have a PO number, but I'm just going to make up one. PO dash. Just make up a string. I don't have any notes. I'm just going to say my note. This is a test. Address 2, I don't have anything for address 2 in this case. Shipping company, Matco. Phone number, 3-10-4. All right, so on this last part, I don't know what shipping methods are available for this address. So in this case, I'm just going to post this with no shipping method, and let's see what happens. So if I send this off, what it's going to do is it's going to actually rate shot for me, and it's going to give me options. So what it returns is actually a list of shipping rates with different types. So it gives me each code, the method name, and the cost, and it's rate shot this based upon my items. Now, if I come down here, you'll notice that I don't have an ID, so I can't actually submit this quote. It has all the information about the order. Notice that for shipping rate, it has nothing, so it's there. It does have a total, but hasn't, it's just calculated based upon the items. It's given me a instantaneous stock quantity. So anytime you quote something, anytime you order something, it's going to give you the stock quantity and it's going to save it at the point in time you ordered. And it's going to tell me the quantity that I wanted of each item. It's going to tell me, my dealer price versus the MSRP. So I have both a piece of information. And you notice down here, it doesn't have a shipping method code and there's no errors. So if there was, let's say I typed in the wrong SKU, and it can't find it, it's going to throw an error here. It's going to tell you, hey, you have an error. And then on the entire quote, it's also going to have an error. So that's a quick way if you want to make sure that nothing crazy is going on, that you can just verify, yay, listen, these items actually can ship. All right, so in this case, I want to actually pick FedEx Ground. So I'm going to grab that method code, and I'm going to come up here to shipping method code, and I'm going to drop it in, and I'm going to repost it and see what it does. All right, so now it's gone through, it's rate shopped, and it's validated that the rate is still good. In this case, it is. It has gone in, it's dropped the rate, shipping rate, into the actual subtotal, or below the subtotal, and I've now got a total that is going to charge my account when it gets processed. I still am okay on both my items. Stock is there to ship. There's no crazy issue with the SKU. And down here, it actually has the FedEx Ground as the method. Now, one other thing you'll notice is that it actually now has a valid ID. So instead of all the zeros, it's actually given me an ID that I can go use. And this ID is good for 24 hours. After 24 hours, it just kind of goes away in the system. So if I wanted to actually submit this quote and place an order, I would copy this ID. I go over to the submit endpoint. I would go into the body, and notice here it just has one thing. It has this quote ID. So what I do is I drop the quote ID in, I hit send, and bang, it has now been submitted. There's no rates because it's not shopping anymore. It's going to have the ID. So this is now the ID of my order. So once this gets charged and goes from being a submitted quote to an actual paid order, you'll actually see the status change, and then as it ships, you'll start seeing the status change again. It's got my PO, it's got my notes, it has an updated history, so every time it gets updated or changed, it's got history there, it's got my address, it's got my rates, and it's got my type down here. And if I was going to go ahead and search for this, I can actually search. If I wanted to pull this back up, I can go under my order ID endpoint, and just to make sure that it's working, parameters, I can actually enter this into order ID, which is going to be the /order ID, and sure enough, I can pull it up here. I could do it by PO. If I wanted to pull my PO, I could do it, or date range. I could actually come in here and look at date ranges for this. So multiple ways to look at these orders and kind of interact with it, and that's basically it.